complaints to others in the governor's inner circle and transferred Ms. Bennett within days. 2 weeks later, the chief of staff and a special counsel spoke with Ms. Bennett, who detailed interactions with the governor that went back to May of 2019. The chief of staff and special counsel both found Ms. Bennett to be credible. The chief of staff consulted with the special counsel and with Melissa DeRosa, the secretary to the governor, and they decided they did not need to report this to the governor's Office of Employee Relations, GOER, or conduct any meaningful investigation. They simply moved Ms. Bennett and instituted a policy of not having a junior staffer be alone with the governor. And even that, they said, was to protect the governor. That response, we find, was a violation of the executive chamber's harassment policy, which clearly requires that all possible harassment be reported to GOER and investigated. Now, 6 months later, in December of 2020, when Lindsay Boylan tweeted that she had been sexually harassed by the governor, the executive chamber once again failed to report the issue to GOER. Although Ms. DeRosa, the special counsel, and certain other advisors knew about the allegations that Charlotte Bennett had made that the special counsel had found credible, no one treated Ms. Boylan's allegations seriously other than as a threat to the governor. Rather than any effort to determine if the governor had engaged in a pattern of sexually harassing behavior, a team of senior staffers, former staffers, and outside confidants with no official title or role mobilized to attack and try to neutralize Ms. Boylan by sharing disparaging information with the press. Within hours of Ms. Boylan's December 13th, 2020 tweet alleging sexual harassment, key members of the governor's inner circle had obtained confidential memos, ones that were stamped attorney-client privileged. They were primarily about an interaction between Ms. Boylan and an assistant. They then redacted the names of individuals other than Ms. Boylan and started sending the memos to reporters. There was also a proposed letter or op-ed drafted by the governor that went through several drafts. The letter attacked Ms. Boylan for alleged conduct at work, for alleged conduct with men other than the governor, as well as postulating various political conspiracies, including that Ms. Boylan was funded by far-right Republicans and supporters of Donald Trump. Although the letter was never published, it was sent or read to a variety of people outside the executive chamber, either to get their advice or ask them to sign their names to it, and shared ultimately with at least one member of the press. The governor was arguing for the release of that letter. He was finally convinced to abandon it by a number of people who thought the letter was a bad idea, in part because what was in the letter couldn't be substantiated and because they thought that victim shaming would be bad as a strategy. Both federal and state law prohibit an employer from taking any action that would dissuade a reasonable employee or former employee from making or supporting a charge of discrimination. Under that standard, the confidential release of internal records to the press and the dissemination of the letter disparaging Ms. Boylan constituted unlawful retaliation. I will now turn it back to Mr. Kim to say a few words about our findings with respect to the workplace culture within the executive chamber.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. As set forth in our report, we find that the culture within the executive chamber contributed to the conditions that allowed the governor's sexually harassing conduct to occur and to persist. The culture also informed the way in which the executive chamber responded to allegations of sexual harassment, as Ms. Clark has described, through violations of their own policies and through unlawful retaliation. Well, what was the culture? Words that witnesses have used repeatedly to describe it include toxic, hostile, abusive. Others use words like fear, intimidation, bullying, vindictive. As one senior staffer stated bluntly, as the sexual harassment allegations became public in March of this year in text exchanges with another in the administration, I quote, "Hopefully, when this is all done, people will realize the culture, even outside of the sexual harassment stuff, is not something you can get away with. You can't berate and terrify people 24/7, close quote. It was a culture where you could not say no to the governor. And if you upset him or his senior staff, you would be written off, cast aside, or worse. But at the same time, the witnesses described a culture that normalized and overlooked everyday flirtations, physical intimacy, and inappropriate comments by the governor. One senior staffer testified that at a work event, she sat on the governor's lap. Another staffer said she recalled kissing the governor on the lips. The governor testified that those things may have happened with senior staffers. One complainant described her interactions with the governor by saying they were, quote, strange and uncomfortable. But it was like the Twilight Zone. The typical rules did not apply. You should just view it as a compliment if the governor finds you aesthetically pleasing enough, close quote. The coexistence in the executive chamber, the executive chamber's culture of fear and flirtation, intimidation and intimacy, abuse and affection, created a work environment ripe for harassment. As another complainant testified, and I quote, "What makes it so hard to describe every single inappropriate incident is the culture of the place. On the one hand, he makes all this inappropriate and creepy behavior normal and like you should not complain. On the other hand, you see people getting punished and screamed at if you do anything where you disagree with him or his top aides. I really just wanted to go to work and be recognized for my work and nothing else," close quote. Charlotte Bennett, the complainant Ms. Clark mentioned, who was transferred after she reported inappropriate comments by the governor to senior staff, summarized her experience in a text message as follows, quote, "The verbal abuse, intimidation, and living in constant fear were all horribly toxic, dehumanizing, and traumatizing. And then he came on to me. I was scared to imagine what would happen if I rejected him. So I disappeared instead. My time in public service ended because he was bored and lonely. It still breaks my heart." That's a quote from a text that Ms. Bennett wrote. This culture made it all the more difficult, if not impossible, for complainants to report the harassment from which they were suffering, particularly when the harasser was the governor of the state of New York. But one by one courageous woman after another stepped forward. They stepped forward to say, enough is enough. They came forward in our investigation to tell us about their experiences, the harassment they suffered at the hands of the governor. In our report, we've used their words. And their words, so long silenced, speak loudly for themselves. These brave women stepped forward to speak truth to power. And in doing so, they expressed faith in the belief that although the governor may be powerful, the truth is even more so. This is what lies at the heart of our investigation and the findings in our report.
We will now take questions, and the questioning will be directed by Delaney Kempner.
Hold on. Please say your name and your outlet. Marcia Kramer from CBS. I wondered if you could tell me if the governor will be facing any, I know this is a civil investigation, but were you making any referrals to prosecutors so that he could face either state or federal charges?
Our work is concluded, and the document is now public, and the matter is civil in nature, and is not does not have any criminal consequences. It is my understanding.
I will state that it's our understanding that for the young woman whose breast was groped, that the Albany Police Department already has a report about that. As for anything else, as the Attorney General stated, all the information is fully documented in the report, and any prosecutors or police departments can look at the evidence and determine if they want to take further action.
Josefa? Hi, Josefa Velasquez, the city. Now that this report is concluded, will your office be sharing it with the Assembly's committee that is investigating whether or not these are impeachable offenses, and if so, what's the coordination between the office and the Assembly?
There is no coordination between the Office of Attorney General and the Assembly. The document is now public and will be distributed to members of the Assembly as well as the leadership.
Ms. James, can the governor...
Can you introduce yourself?
Oh, Bernadette Hogan from the New York Post. Can the governor be sued in any way? Is there a statute of limitations, or are there any penalties specifically tied to this report? I know Ms. Clark has.
Sure. There's no penalty specifically tied to this report. The women can decide, some of the women can decide themselves if they want to bring a civil action. The statute of limitations is generally 3 years under one federal statute in the state law and a little bit shorter under another federal statute, although for hostile work environments, as long as one act occurs within the statute of limitations, one can go back to cover the entire hostile work environment.
And in regards to the violation against the executive chamber's own policy, what kind of violations could be?
I can't think of a specific law that would violate, but that certainly is taken into account in determining liability for sexual harassment.
Dave Evans on Channel 7. Ms. James, can I ask you, do you think the governor, given the devastating nature of this report, and I get what you're saying about it's up to local prosecutors if they want to move forward on this, but do you think that this would all be wrapped up well if you would resign, leave?
That decision ultimately is up to the governor of the state of New York. The report speaks for itself. And right now I think we should all be focused on the courageous and bravery of the women who came forward. And all of us should be focused on keeping women safe, believing women, and allowing women to speak their truth. And that's exactly what this document does.
Andrew Seth from WNBC. You mentioned in your opening remarks today defending the credentials of your investigators today. Were you personally bothered by the governor's own remarks in the past week or so that you could just Google their backgrounds and draw your own conclusion that this is a politically motivated investigation?
There were attempts to undermine and to politicize this investigation. And there were attacks on me as well as members of the team, which I find offensive. And our focus, again, should be on the bravery and the courage of these 11 women and of the others who came forward. These allegations were substantiated. They were corroborated. And the team before you, Ms. Clark and Mr. Kim, are professionals who are widely respected, not only in New York, but all across this nation. And I support their work, will defend their work, and I believe these women.
Zach?
Zach came from New York One. You mentioned that it corroborated a lot of what the witness testimony was who you spoke with during the investigation. When you interviewed Governor Cuomo, did he admit to or deny the majority of what was said here?
There was a combination. There are some incidents that he admitted to but had a different interpretation of. And there were other things that he denied or said he didn't recall.
Speak a little bit more about that. When WNYC, can you speak a little bit more about what that conversation, that 11-hour conversation was like the other week?
I can't recount all 11 hours of it. As I said, there were certain things like he admitted that he asked Ms. Bennett whether she had been involved with older men. He denied touching the state trooper, although he said he might have kissed her at an event. And there were certain things that he turned around and said that, for example, the executive assistant number one, that he did hug her repeatedly, but claimed she was the one who initiated the hugs. So it was a mixture of admitting to certain things, but putting a different spin on them and denying others.
It's all outlined in the report.
Shimon Prokopiev from CNN. So what are the next steps here? You have this report, obviously a lot of devastating information in it. A lot of people are going to ask, okay, so what happens next? And you're not referring it for criminal charges. What are the next steps that you would like to see, perhaps maybe the assembly take or someone else take to have some other kind of punishment or something else here? Because right now it just seems like you have this report and it's out there, and what would be the next steps?
We were tasked with the responsibility of engaging in an investigation, and we have concluded our investigation, and our work is done. And so as it relates to next steps, that's entirely up to the governor and or the assembly and the general public. But the work of the Office of the Attorney General and these special deputies has concluded.
Do you think the governor should run for re-election?
That's a political question. The work of the Office of the Attorney General is done.
Okay, we're going to take 2 more questions in here, and then we're going to go virtual.
Hi, Dana Rubenstein from the New York Times. This is a little bit of a hypothetical, but if an individual with a history of running a workplace like this were running for governor, would you consider that person fit to serve as the leader of New York State?
I don't engage in speculation, Dana. The report speaks for itself. They substantiated and corroborated the allegations and have issued findings that, in fact, the governor violated state and federal laws.
Okay, this is the last one here, and then we're going to go virtual. Adam.
Adam Reese, NBC News. As a prosecutor and as an attorney general, are you frustrated that you can't move criminally on these charges, numerous charges that you and the investigators have said are both that violate state and federal law?
It's not an issue of being frustrated. The issue, we were tasked with the responsibility by the governor of the state of New York to issue a report, and we have issued this report. And all throughout the process, we put our heads down, we've done our work, and at this point, we're going to allow the chips to fall where they may.
Okay, we're going to go virtual now. Fabian.
Thank you, everybody. If you have a question, please click the raise hand button. If you have a question, please click the raise hand button. First, we're going to hear from John Campbell from Gannett. John, your mic is open.
Hi, Attorney General. A couple questions, and I apologize. It's tough to hear some of the questions, so that some of these might be repeats here. But the investigation into the governor's book deal, as well as the staff resources that were used on that, does that remain ongoing? That's separate from this. Is it still ongoing? And also, can you make some sort of formal referral to prosecutors' offices based on this report today, or is that something that they would have to pick up the ball on their own?
The investigation with respect to the book and whether or not public resources were utilized is ongoing, and it's separate and apart from this investigation. And with regards to criminal jurisdiction usually is conveyed upon the Office of Attorney General. Usually we get a request under the executive law. And at this point in time, our work is concluded, and we will not be engaging in any criminal investigation with respect to the conduct of the governor of the state of New York.
Our second question is from Josh Dothy from Washington Post. Josh, your line is open. Josh, you have to unmute your line.
Can you hear me now? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you, Josh.
I said, hi, Attorney General.
Hi, Josh.
There appear to be about 11 allegations here, 11 different victims. Did you find all 11 of the victims who came forward to be credible, and were you able to find contemporaneous notes or proof about all 11 of the victims?
We found all 11 women to be credible. There was corroboration to varying degrees. Probably at the end of being most corroborated, Charlotte Bennett talked to people and texted people contemporaneously. Some of her texts were practically in real time regarding conversations with the governor. As well, the reports that she made to the chief of staff and the special counsel, their contemporaneous notes are quite consistent with what she has said to the press and what she told us. The state trooper, the touching incidents, the one where he touched her stomach was witnessed by another state trooper who confirmed it to us. The kiss, the governor kissed her once, that was confirmed to us by another state trooper. And there were other incidents where she told people at the time. Other people that we spoke to did tell people at the time, and we confirmed with the people they spoke with, or had written documentation, either text messages or emails in which they recounted things contemporaneously. So things, when you see the report,